Do you know men who seem stuck in time, who avoid responsibility, run away from commitments, and live as if life were an endless playground? Michel de Montaigne, one of the greatest thinkers in history, denounced this back in the 16th century. And what he said is powerful. It's uncomfortable. And few have the courage to repeat it today. Get ready. In this video, you'll discover the brutal truth about men who refuse to grow up, and why it may be destroying their lives without them even realizing it. Number 1. What Montaigne really observed. Michel de Montaigne, a 16th century French philosopher, was one of the first thinkers to delve deeply into human nature, revealing truths that continue to disturb us today. In his essays, he did not spare criticism of those who, even as they aged physically, remained stuck in a childish mindset, refusing to grow emotionally and spiritually. He said that many prefer to live in ignorance and irresponsibility, simply because it saves them from the effort required to mature. For Montaigne, true maturity has nothing to do with age, but with the courage to face oneself, to face one's own fears, to accept criticism, and, above all, to take responsibility for one's own existence. The philosopher viewed with concern the behavior of men who, to avoid the discomfort of self-knowledge, immersed themselves in superficial distractions, fleeing from any kind of deeper reflection. According to him, these men build their entire lives on denial. They deny their mistakes, their guilt, their traumas, and blame everything around them: circumstances, fate, others. But Montaigne did not see this as mere weakness. He understood that this refusal to mature was in fact a conscious choice, albeit disguised as carelessness. For him, the greatest danger was not ignorance itself, but the decision to remain ignorant in order to avoid change. And that is the most shocking truth. Many men do not want to grow up because growing up hurts, because it requires letting go of the fragile ego. It requires continuous effort, and it imposes the need to transform oneself. Montaigne did not speak with superiority, but with frankness, and his message remains alive. It is not enough to grow old, one must evolve. Otherwise, all one has is the body of an adult, with the soul of a child, lost, insecure, and eternally dependent on the validation of others. Number 2. The signs of a man who refuses to grow up. A man who refuses to grow up does not need to announce it loudly. His behavior speaks for him, and the signs are evident, even if disguised under the guise of freedom or lifestyle. The first and clearest is the refusal to make commitments. These men avoid deep relationships, do not commit to long-term projects, and always live in provisional mode, as if everything could change at any moment, except themselves. Everything is temporary, disposable, superficial. Second, they are always seeking refuge in addictions or distractions. Whether it's gaming, social media, pornography, drinking, or constant partying, they flee from reality as if fleeing from a mirror. Facing boredom or loneliness is unbearable because it would bring them face to face with the inner emptiness they refuse to acknowledge. Another obvious sign: they blame others for their failures. For them, the fault lies with their parents, school, the government, their boss, bad luck, everything but their own choices. This outsourcing of responsibility is the hallmark of immaturity. They are experts at making excuses, but illiterate when it comes to self-criticism. Furthermore, they cannot stand criticism. Any feedback is interpreted as an attack. The slightest correction triggers defensive, explosive, or escapist behavior, like a spoiled teenager who never learned how to deal with frustration. Men like this do not grow because they refuse to accept that they have room for improvement. They prefer to surround themselves with people who praise them, feed their illusions, and confirm their excuses. Finally, there is a more subtle but extremely destructive sign. They live without direction. They have no purpose, no consistent goals, and build nothing. They live like leaves in the wind, reacting to circumstances rather than leading their own story. And most tragically, many do not even realize that they are missing out on real life, and while trying to maintain a comfortable and childish version of existence. Number 3, the truth no one likes to hear. The truth no one likes to hear, but which Michel de Montaigne pointed out centuries ago, is that many men are not victims of life. They are accomplices to their own stagnation. We live in a culture that glorifies eternal youth, where immaturity is seen as charming and irresponsibility is romanticized as freedom. But Montaigne strips away this disguise. With brutal clarity, those who do not mature rot. Remaining emotionally immature is not neutral or harmless. It is a slow poison that corrodes identity, destroys relationships, and paralyzes human potential. The man who refuses to grow up is, in effect, sabotaging his own existence. He lives, waiting for the world to adjust to his fragility, for others to understand him without him having to change, for life to be generous even without effort on his part. But reality is not kind to those who shirk responsibility. The bill always comes with interest. Montaigne knew that running away from maturity was, at its core, an act of cowardice, a deep fear of facing oneself without masks, without excuses, without crutches. And this cowardice disguises itself as pride, sarcasm, or rebellion, but at its core, it reveals only a fragile soul that did not have the courage to rebuild itself. Society is full of men like this, grown in body but small in character, and the most dangerous thing, many of them don't even realize the hole they're in. They think they're living as they want, when in fact they're trapped in an invisible prison, the prison of self-denial. They deny their ability to evolve, their power to change, their duty to lead their own story. Montaigne would say that this is not living, it is merely surviving, vegetating amid distractions and excuses as the days go by. The truth is hard, but liberating. Growing up hurts, yes, but refusing to grow up hurts even more. And those who do not accept this necessary pain end up living in permanent pain, silent, disguised, and devastating. Number 4, the path to maturity according to Montaigne. The path to maturity, according to Michel de Montaigne and the Stoics, is not easy, but it is profoundly transformative. Montaigne believed that self-knowledge was the first step, and perhaps the most painful. He said that it takes courage to look into the mirror of your soul and recognize what is most uncomfortable about yourself. Your fears, your vices, your laziness, your envy, your arrogance disguised as self-confidence. Stoics such as Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius reinforce this point by arguing that a mature person is one who does not depend on circumstances to be at peace. They are their own master. They train their minds to endure discomfort, to accept what they cannot control, and to focus on what depends on their actions. Maturity, therefore, comes from inner discipline. It is not a question of age, but of attitude towards life. It is saying no to one's own weaknesses every day, even when no one is looking. Montaigne saw reflection as an essential habit. Writing, thinking, questioning one's own attitudes was a constant exercise in growth. The Stoics taught the same practice under another name: daily meditation, journaling, contemplation of death, memento mori, preparation for adversity, premeditatio malorum. For both, maturity was built on the courage to face the truth, without drama, without victimhood, without escape. It is when man stops waiting for external recognition and starts seeking excellence for himself. It is when he takes control of his own narrative and stops living as a victim. Maturity is responsibility, self-control, clarity, and above all, it is the willingness to learn from everything, even pain. Montaigne and the Stoics do not promise an easy life, but they offer a solid, unbreakable path for those who have the courage to follow it, because in the end, growing up is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming aware. Number 5, the price of not changing. What happens to the man who remains stagnant? The man who refuses to change may even believe that he is gaining time, avoiding conflict, or preserving his own freedom. But in practice, he is slowly digging his own prison. Stagnation takes a silent and devastating toll. Life doesn't stop to wait for anyone. While he repeats the same habits, the same mistakes, the same cycles of self-sabotage, the world around him moves on, and he begins to realize that he is falling behind. Relationships become shallow or fall apart. True friends drift away. Professional opportunities slip away because he still acts like a beginner, waiting for recognition without delivering. He begins to feel out of place, irrelevant, and worse, resentful of the success of others, of the demands of reality, of the time that will never return. But the truth he doesn't want to face is simple. It's not the world that's against him. He's the one who stopped in time. Men like this live as if they have all the time in the world, but one day they wake up and realize they've wasted the best years of their lives on distractions and addictions when they could have been building something meaningful. The pain of not changing is subtle at first. Chronic fatigue, constant boredom, dissatisfaction with everything. Then it becomes unbearable. Loss of self-esteem, deep regret, loneliness. And when they realize it, they are surrounded by a life that no longer fits them because they never had the courage to grow up. Montaigne and the Stoics knew it. The price of avoiding the pain of growth is to live a much worse pain, that of a wasted existence. Not growing up deep down is choosing to slowly die inside. And the cruelest thing is that no one will warn you. The fall will be silent, daily, invisible, until one day that man looks in the mirror and realizes that he no longer recognizes who he sees because he refused every day to become who he could have been. Number 6, rebuilding. How to start changing for real. A man's rebuilding begins when he stops lying to himself. There is no real transformation as long as there are excuses, victimhood, or outsourcing of blame. Montaigne teaches us that the greatest of all human endeavors is to know oneself, and that is exactly where change begins, in the brutal decision to face what is inside oneself with total honesty. The first step is not grand, it is silent, admitting that something needs to change. It doesn't matter how old you are, what your past is, or what mistakes you've made. What matters is the present. And the present demands action. The Stoics reinforce this principle by teaching that we should focus on what is within our control. We cannot control the past, other people, or the events around us, but we can control our choices, our discipline, and our thoughts. Rebuilding is a daily process. It starts with creating new habits, getting up early, organizing your mind, reading good books, avoiding empty conversations, striving for excellence in every small task. It is consciously abandoning the distractions that once served to numb the pain, addictions, procrastination, futilities. It is setting real goals and achieving them even when no one is watching. It is talking less and doing more. It's learning to say no to immediate pleasure in order to say yes to a life with purpose. Montaigne and the Stoics do not promise shortcuts, but they guarantee that the journey is worth it. Real change requires discomfort, discipline, and falling down and getting up countless times. But over time, the man who once felt lost begins to feel strength where there was weakness, clarity where there was confusion, and peace where there was only guilt. Rebuilding is the rebirth of the conscious man who no longer lives on autopilot. He takes the helm of his own life, and that is true power, not depending on anyone else to be the author of your transformation. The real turning point in a man's Life happens when he understands that maturity is not a destination, but a constant decision. It's not about having all the answers, but about being willing to ask the right questions, the ones that challenge the ego, unmask illusions, and force you to look within. In an age where everything is fast, disposable, and shallow, becoming a deep-centered and lucid man is almost an act of rebellion. Transformation requires silence. It requires cutting ties. It requires abandoning the weak and proud version of yourself to make room for something more solid, more noble. This process is lonely, and that is why few face it, but those who do become rare. While many live like leaves in the wind, these men build roots. They are not moved by applause, nor broken by rejection. They are guided by principles, not impulses. Instead of waiting for the world to change, they become the kind of men who change the world around them with presence, clarity, and action. This is the call that echoes behind the words of Montaigne and the Stoics. Be the rock in the midst of chaos, the man who does not shy away from discomfort, who does not hide behind excuses. The world doesn't need more empty promises. It needs living examples. And maybe now is the time to start being exactly that. Only for the determined people who stayed until the end of this video, comment below, "I stayed until the end." That way, I'll know who really wants to take control of their life once and for all. Take care and see you in the next video.